Right now, as you listen to my voice, the physical sound waves hitting your eardrum are doing, well, they're doing far more than just delivering words.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, those invisible vibrations are actively dictating how many white blood cells your immune system is producing.
Which is mad to think about.
It is. They are altering the electrical pulse of your heart. They're shifting your brain chemistry. It sounds like absolute science fiction, but the acoustic environment you are sitting in this very second is fundamentally rewriting your biology.
Straight away, in
Yeah.
real time.
Exactly. So welcome to you, the learner. It is absolutely brilliant to have you with us for this deep dive. I want you to just, take a second and look at your daily soundtrack.
Right.
When you commute, when you work, when you are trying to wind down, you're likely curating a background noise. But the massive stack of research we have on the table today suggests we have been treating music purely as acoustic wallpaper.
Yeah, just something to fill the silence.
Precisely. We're completely ignoring the fact that it is a highly potent physiological tool.
It's actually a staggering oversight in how we manage our daily health, to be honest. I mean, we look at our diets meticulously, we track our steps.
We monitor our sleep hygiene, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yet we leave our auditory diet entirely to chance. And the literature we're examining today, it spans multiple disciplines that, frankly, rarely communicate with one another.
Which is what makes this so fascinating.
It really is. We have psychological analyses of emotional processing. We've got rigorous clinical trials from Toyama University and Saitama Medical University, advanced cognitive science reports, and even empirical data straight from the sports and fitness sector.
And what I find so compelling is that despite coming from completely different angles,
Right.
a sports physiologist looking at a runner's stamina, and then a neurologist looking at a dementia patient's anxiety, they're all converging on the exact same biological pathways.
Spot on. The biology doesn't change.
Right. So our mission today is to decode this. We are going to figure out how to strategically hack your daily life using sound.
And we are getting into the granular details here.
Oh, we are. I'm talking about the specific beats per minute, the exact hertz frequencies, and the structural rhythms required to to optimize deep focus, push your physical limits, heal emotional trauma, and actively fight off viral infections.
It's a massive toolkit.
It really is. But before we get to the virus-fighting frequencies, I want to start with the most common, almost reflexive way we use music. Let's talk about emotional triage.
Right, because the instinct to reach for music when we are in emotional distress is completely universal. It transcends culture, it transcends age.
Yeah.
But the actual mechanics of why we make the specific choices we do, they're just fascinating.
Well, let me throw a scenario at you just to set the scene. You have just gone through a crushing breakup. Or perhaps you've suffered a massive professional failure.
Ouch. Yeah.
You feel utterly awful. When you get back to your flat, you don't reach for an uplifting pop anthem, do you?
Absolutely not.
No, you dig out the most melancholic, devastating acoustic track you can find, and you play it on a loop. And on paper, that makes absolutely no sense.
It seems completely counterintuitive.
Right. If you are cold, you turn on a heater. If you are sad, why wouldn't you play happy music to warm up your mood?
Well, it's a great question.
Because trying to listen to bright, cheerful music when I am miserable, it feels incredibly jarring. It is like having a friend aggressively shouting, "Cheer up! Look on the bright side" at you.
It is exhausting.
It is. It's completely exhausting. A sad song feels more like a friend who just, comes over, sits down in the silence, and cries alongside you.
That analogy of the aggressive friend versus the empathetic friend, it actually maps perfectly onto the neurology of emotional processing.
Wait, really, it's a literal neurological response.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
When you are in a state of acute distress, your nervous system is essentially flooded with stress hormones.
Right.
If you introduce a bright, high-tempo pop song into that environment, your brain registers a severe mismatch between your internal chemistry and the external environment.
So it feels wrong on a chemical level.
Exactly. This creates what we call cognitive friction. Your brain has to expend its precious energy trying to reconcile why the external world is so joyful while your internal world is just collapsing.
So it just rejects it.
It simply rejects the input, yeah. And this brings us to a fundamental psychological concept known as the homogeneous effect.
Right. I came across that in the Rocco Note article in our stack, the homogeneous effect. It sounds a bit clinical, but it essentially means like attracting like, doesn't it?
Spot on. In this context, it refers to the profound psychological comfort we experience when an external stimulus, like a piece of music, perfectly mirrors our internal emotional state.
So it acts as a proxy.
Yes. When you are deeply upset, playing a devastatingly sad song engages this homogeneous effect. The music acts as a proxy for your own voice.
Because we often don't have the words ourselves.
Precisely. Often when we are traumatized or grieving, we just lack the vocabulary to articulate the sheer weight of what we are feeling. The complex chord progressions and those melancholic lyrics, they do the heavy lifting for us.
They articulate the pain so we don't have to.
Yeah. And when the music perfectly aligns with your emotional frequency, it creates a safe psychological container.
Mm.
Those suppressed heavy emotions are sort of coaxed to the surface.
And very often, that coaxing results in a rather intense crying session.
It does.
Which, again, society tends to frame as a loss of control, breakdown. But the
Yeah.
biological data in our stack frames it completely differently.
We really need to reframe crying entirely, because we are talking about the catharsis effect here.
Right, catharsis.
Yeah. The word catharsis stems from ancient Greek, originally meaning purification or excretion.
Wait, excretion? Like going to the loo?
Literally. It was used in a medical sense long before it was ever used in a theatrical one. When you cry, and we mean specifically emotional tears here, not just the reflex tears you get when chopping an onion.
Right, the real sobbing.
Yeah, when you produce emotional tears, you are engaging in a highly advanced mechanism of biological self-care.
How
Because emotional tears actually contain higher levels of stress hormones and toxins than regular reflex tears. You're physically excreting the chemical byproducts of your stress.
Wow. So it is quite literally a mental and physical detox.
Yeah.
You're flushing the stress hormones out of your system through your tear ducts.
You are. And the neurological aftermath of that is staggering. A profound, intense bout of emotional crying triggers a massive reset in the parasympathetic nervous system.
And the parasympathetic nervous system, that's
That's essentially your body's rest and digest mode. It's the brake pedal to your fight or flight response.
Right, okay.
So psychologically speaking, the relaxation effect, that reduction in baseline anxiety after a good cry, it is functionally equivalent to several hours of deep restorative sleep.
I mean, I am struggling to wrap my head around that. A 20-minute crying session over a sad Spotify playlist gives my brain the same restorative reset as a long nap.
The reduction in central nervous system arousal is remarkably similar, yes. But here is where the pharmacology of music makes it even more complex.
Okay, go on.
You are listening to a sad song. You are feeling the grief and you are crying. But the brain doesn't just process the sadness of the lyrics. It also processes the aesthetic beauty of the melody, the harmony, the tone of the human voice.
Right, you're appreciating the art.
Exactly. And recognizing that beauty triggers the reward centers in your brain.
Wait. So the brain is rewarding me for listening to something that is actively making me sad.
It is rewarding you for the aesthetic experience.
Mm-hmm.
As you weep, your brain actually begins to secrete dopamine.
Which is the reward chemical.
Right, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure.
Yeah.
And it releases that alongside serotonin, which stabilizes your mood and promotes a sense of well-being.
So it's a dual track experience.
Exactly. The narrative of the song allows you to process the grief, while the beauty of the music drips a steady dose of pleasure chemicals into your system, softening the blow. It is an incredibly sophisticated biological transaction.
It makes absolute sense of why we feel so incredibly light and unburdened after wallowing in a sad playlist.
It really does.
And the Greeks knew this, didn't they? We mentioned the root of the word catharsis, but Aristotle actually wrote extensively about this phenomenon.
He did, yes, primarily in his work Poetics. Aristotle observed audiences attending tragic plays in those great amphitheaters.
Right.
And he found it endlessly fascinating that citizens would willingly spend their afternoons watching a protagonist suffer horrendous, unfair twists of fate.
Just absolute misery on stage.
Yeah. The audiences would weep, they would feel intense fear and pity. But Aristotle noted that when the chorus delivered the final lines and the citizens filed out of the theater, they didn't look depressed, they looked invigorated.
Because they had vicariously lived through the worst-case scenario, purged their own low-level mundane anxieties, and emerged unscathed.
Exactly. They used the fictional tragedy of the play to process their own real-world stress.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we use sad playlists and tearjerker films to achieve the exact same ancient biological purge.
That is brilliant. But there is another layer to this emotional regulation toolkit mentioned in the research, and it has to do with time travel, essentially.
Ah, yes, the reminiscence bump. The reminiscence bump is one of the most reliable phenomena in autobiographical memory research.
How does it work?
Well, if you ask a 50-year-old to recall memories from their life, you won't get an even spread across all decades. You will get a massive concentration of incredibly vivid, highly detailed memories from a very specific window,
Which is when?
roughly their late teens through to their late 20s.
Why that specific decade? Is it just because lots of firsts happen then? First love, first job, moving out of the parents' house?
That is a huge part of it, definitely. The brain is encountering intense, novel experiences which require strong neural encoding.
Right.
But biologically, the brain is also undergoing its final stages of maturation. It's heavily myelinating the neural pathways, which essentially locks these memories in with high-definition clarity.
And music gets locked in with them.
Deeply intertwined. Because music in that era is often tied to identity formation. The music you loved at 20 becomes intrinsically linked to your sense of self.
Which explains why the indie rock bands I listened to at university still give me a visceral reaction that a brilliant new release today simply cannot match.
Exactly.
So how do we use this tactically when we are stressed?
Well, when you are overwhelmed by current circumstances, say work pressures, financial stress, relationship issues, your current environment feels threatening.
Yeah, you feel trapped.
Right. By deliberately selecting a playlist from your personal reminiscence bump, you trigger a neurological escape hatch.
Wow, an escape hatch.
Yeah, the auditory cue bypasses your current stress state and unlocks that vault of highly encoded positive memories. It instantly floods your nervous system with the emotional resonance of a time when life felt more expansive, perhaps simpler, or just full of potential.
So it won't solve the fact that I have a massive tax bill due, but it provides a highly effective temporary physiological reprieve.
Exactly. It's a reset button.
It is a remarkable toolkit. So for you, the learner, if you are devastated, use the homogeneous effect. Find the music that matches the dark mood. Let the aesthetic beauty trigger the dopamine, and physically flush the stress hormones out through tears.
Spot on.
And if you need an emergency emotional escape, dial up the soundtrack of your 20-year-old self.
It works every time.
But I want to move from our passive emotions to our active logical processing now, because this is where I suspect my own habits are leading me massively astray.
Oh, how so?
Well, if I have a mountain of administrative work to get through or a highly dense, dry report to read, my immediate instinct is to put on my favorite fast-paced rock tracks.
Right.
I turn the volume up to create this wall of sound, to keep my energy high and block out the office noise. But looking at the cognitive science in our stack, I am actively sabotaging myself, aren't I?
I'm afraid so, yes.
I knew it.
The strategy you were describing is incredibly common, but from a neurological standpoint, it is a complete disaster for complex cognitive tasks.
Why is it so bad?
To understand why, we have to look at how the brain manages incoming data, specifically focusing on working memory.
Right, and working memory is basically that temporary mental workbench, isn't it? Where I'm trying to hold the previous sentence in my head while I decode the current one.
That's a perfect description, yes.
So I picture it like a computer desktop. If I have a loud, chaotic music playing, is it essentially like having a massive resource-heavy application running in the background, hogging all the RAM?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it. Fast, loud music demands processing power. Even if you are trying your hardest to ignore it, your auditory cortex is frantically decoding the complex rhythms, the shifting frequencies, and the dynamic volume changes.
It's working overtime.
Exactly. Let's examine a massive 2012 study by Thompson and colleagues published in the Psychology of Music. They didn't just ask people how they felt. They ran empirical tests on reading comprehension.
Real data.
Yes. They had subjects attempt to read and analyze complex academic texts under various auditory conditions.
And the subjects listening to the high-energy tracks.
They failed, essentially. Their reading comprehension plummeted compared to the control group who were working in silence.
Wow.
The researchers identified a massive theft of cognitive resources. The prefrontal cortex, which is trying to handle the syntax, the vocabulary, and the logical flow of the text, is constantly being interrupted.
By the music.
By the auditory cortex demanding bandwidth to process the loud, fast music. Your brain only has a finite amount of processing power at any given millisecond.
So, by playing loud rock music, I'm forcing my brain into a state of constant, exhausting multitasking.
Precisely. You are splitting your RAM.
Okay, but I would argue that instrumental music surely wouldn't be as bad. I mean, if there are no lyrics, there is no language processing required, so it shouldn't interfere with reading words on a page, right?
It is a very logical assumption, but the data proves otherwise.
Really?
Yeah. While lyrics certainly add an extra layer of linguistic interference, the Thompson study found that fast-paced, loud instrumental music still significantly disrupted comprehension. Because the issue isn't just words. It is the complexity and intensity of the acoustic data itself.
So my high-energy study playlist is officially obsolete. It goes in the bin.
For deep work,
But if
absolutely.
I want to actually absorb the information in front of me, what is the scientifically optimal audio environment? What should I be listening to?
Well, the consensus, drawing heavily on the clinical observations from Dr. Harushi Bando and the Croy medical team, points to a highly specific window. You want music sitting between 60 and 80 beats per minute.
60 to 80 BPM. That is quite slow.
It is.
Why that specific tempo?
Because it perfectly mirrors a healthy, calm human resting heart rate.
Ah.
When you expose the body to a sustained rhythm, a phenomenon known as biological synchronization begins to occur.
Wait, so my internal organs are actually trying to match the beat of the external music.
Essentially, yes. The vagus nerve, which acts as the main communication highway between the brain and your major organs, picks up on this steady, calm acoustic environment.
And it tells the body to match it.
Right. Your breathing naturally begins to slow and deepen to align with the tempo. Your heart rate settles. And most importantly for your work, your brainwave activity undergoes a dramatic shift.
Let's track that shift. What is happening electrically in the brain when I switch from my rock playlist to a 60 BPM track?
Okay, so during a typical busy workday, especially if you are stressed or actively wrestling with a difficult problem, your brain operates primarily on beta waves.
Beta waves, and they are.
Beta waves are high-frequency, low-amplitude electrical pulses.
Yeah.
They indicate a state of active alertness, tension, and very often underlying anxiety.
It's that frazzled, too many tabs open feeling.
Exactly. It is a fragmented state of mind. But when you introduce this 60 to 80 BPM acoustic environment, the brain begins to downshift. The chaotic beta waves smooth out, transitioning into alpha waves.
And alpha waves represent the flow state everyone is always chasing.
Yes, they do. Alpha waves denote a state of relaxed, quiet alertness. You are not drowsy, you're not falling asleep, but the anxious static that usually clutters your thoughts just dissipates.
That sounds ideal.
It is an introverted state of deep concentration. It allows the prefrontal cortex to dedicate almost all its resources to the task in front of you, rather than constantly scanning the environment for threats or distractions.
But the research cautions that tempo isn't the only factor, does it? The papers in our stack keep referring to the necessity of white space.
Yes, white space is crucial.
Now, in visual design, white space is the empty room around the text on a page. What does it mean in an audio track?
In audio, white space refers to a lack of acoustic density. It means the track does not feature a wall of sound.
So no Phil Spector production?
Right, no sudden dynamic shifts, no crashing cymbals out of nowhere, no complex, unpredictable polyrhythms. It features interstitial gaps, literal moments of near silence or sustained, fading notes between the chords.
Can you give an example of a genre that does this well?
Think of a very sparse solo piano piece, gentle, slow-moving string arrangements, or certain types of minimalist ambient music, or even lo-fi hip-hop.
Why are those gaps, that white space, so important for focus?
Because they prevent the brain's startle response from activating.
Ah, of course.
Our brains are evolutionarily hardwired to pay attention to sudden changes in sound, because out in the wild, a sudden sound usually meant a predator.
A twig snapping.
Exactly. When music is dense and unpredictable, the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detector, stays on high alert.
It's constantly braced for impact.
Yeah. By using music with ample white space and a predictable 60 to 80 BPM tempo, you create a safe, unobtrusive acoustic bubble. It masks the distracting background noise of the office, but it is so gentle and predictable that the brain quickly habituates to it.
Meaning it requires zero cognitive resources to monitor it.
Spot on.
So to master the cognitive engine, discard the fast tracks for deep analytical work. Sync your environment to a resting heart rate of 60 to 80 BPM, induce those rolling alpha waves, and ensure the music has plenty of acoustic white space so your threat detection system can finally switch off.
That is the perfect formula for focus.
But this creates an interesting contradiction for me. We have established that slow, sparse music is the absolute champion for cognitive focus. But we are physical creatures. When I stand up from the desk and go to the gym or head out for a run, I don't want alpha waves.
No, definitely not.
I want aggression. I know for an absolute fact that if I am struggling on a treadmill and a high-energy dance track comes on, my stride lengthens. I feel the fatigue melt away.
Oh, absolutely.
The science must support this, surely. How does music physically propel the human body?
It absolutely supports it. And the mechanism here is driven by a principle called entrainment.
Entrainment.
Yes. It is a concept borrowed from physics that applies remarkably well to human biology.
I recall reading about entrainment in physics, actually. It was discovered by a Dutch scientist in the 1600s, Christian
That's
Huygens.
the one.
He noticed that if you hang two pendulum clocks on the same wall, no matter how they start, the microscopic vibrations traveling through the wood eventually force the pendulums to swing in perfect unison.
Exactly.
But how does a wooden wall and a clock translate to my running shoes?
Well, the human body is essentially a collection of oscillating biological rhythms, right? Your
Mhm.
heart rate, your respiratory cycle, your footfalls.
Right.
When your auditory cortex processes a strong, repeating external beat, it sends signals directly to the motor cortex.
And the motor cortex controls movement.
Yes, it controls your voluntary muscle movements,
Yeah.
and it inherently wants to synchronize your physical movements with that auditory pulse. It is deeply instinctual.
Like a biological magnet.
Precisely. You see it in toddlers who naturally bob up and down when they hear music, long before they even understand what dancing is. Your body wants to lock onto the beat to create a sense of mechanical harmony.
And the fitness data provides very specific parameters for this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If I am going for a long, sustained run, what is the target BPM?
For steady-state aerobic exercise, so running, rowing, cycling, the data shows the physiological sweet spot sits right between 170 and 190 beats per minute.
170 to 190 BPM, that is phenomenally fast.
It is.
That is the tempo of aggressive drum and bass or rapid-fire punk rock. Why so fast?
Because that tempo closely matches the footfall rate of an efficient runner, and it aligns with a highly elevated target heart rate.
Ah,
When you lock into a 180 BPM track, the entrainment takes over. But the true magic isn't just mechanical, it is neurological.
what do you mean?
Listening to music at this tempo during severe physical exertion significantly alters your perception of fatigue.
Now, I want to push back on that a bit.
Fair enough.
Lactic acid is lactic acid, right? If my muscles are burning and completely oxygen depleted, how on earth does a drum beat change the chemical reality of my legs?
Well, the brilliant thing is, it doesn't change the chemical reality in the muscle. It changes the processing reality in the brain.
Oh, I see.
The afferent nerves are screaming at your brain, sending signals of pain and fatigue, begging you to
He's
stop.
telling you to sit down immediately.
Right. But the auditory cortex and the motor cortex are so overwhelmingly engaged in processing the complex, rapid music and maintaining that synchronized entrainment that they literally drown out the pain signals. It is a form of sensory gating. Your brain has limited bandwidth, as we discussed, and the music hijacks it.
So you objectively perform the exact same amount of mechanical work, but you subjectively feel like you are exerting much less effort.
Exactly. The music acts as an acoustic analgesic, essentially numbing the brain to the pain of the workout.
That is incredible, but what if I am not running? What if I'm doing heavy weightlifting or high-intensity interval training HI day where it is 20 seconds of absolute lung-busting effort followed by rest?
Right. The 180 BPM footfall rhythm wouldn't apply there.
It wouldn't.
It doesn't. For high-load, short-burst training, the objective shifts completely. You don't need a rhythm to pace your stride. You need a physiological spike to maximize your power output.
So what's the tempo for that?
The sports science literature points to what they term motivational music, sitting just over 120 BPM. This music typically features a heavy, driving bass line and aggressive dynamic peaks.
The beat drop.
Yes, the beat drop. So it is less about pacing and more about triggering an adrenaline dump. Precisely, it acts as a stimulant. The aggressive nature of the music triggers the sympathetic nervous system.
Which is the fight-or-flight accelerator we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It causes a microspike in cortisol and adrenaline. It focuses your aggression and drastically increases peak power output for those short, intense intervals.
Right. So 170 to 190 BPM to
Mhm.
trick the brain into ignoring endurance pain, and 120 plus BPM with a heavy drop to spike adrenaline for heavy lifting.
Spot on.
But there is a secondary study in our stack from the journal Neuroscience in 2023 that takes exercise entirely out of this hardcore, sweaty gym context.
The Groove Study.
Yes. It looks at how light movement and music can actually change the architecture of the brain.
This is perhaps one of the most exciting recent developments in cognitive neuroscience. The researchers weren't interested in cardiovascular fitness here. They were interested in executive function.
Okay, set the scene for us.
They set up an experiment combining ultra-low intensity exercise, something as simple as a light, rhythmic stepping motion on a balance board, with music that possesses a high degree of groove.
Right. Let's define groove scientifically because it sounds highly subjective. The study isolates it down to a specific musical property, doesn't it? Syncopation.
Syncopation is the crucial ingredient. In a standard, predictable piece of music, the emphasis lands squarely on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Like a military march.
Very
Ting.
functional.
Exactly. Syncopation disrupts this predictability. It shifts the emphasis to the offbeat, where the spaces between the beats.
It is the rhythmic surprise. It is the core DNA of funk, soul, Afrobeat, and most modern dance music. It creates that bouncy, elastic feeling that makes it almost impossible not to tap your foot.
Yes, and that urge to tap your foot is actually a neurological imperative.
Right.
Yeah. When the brain anticipates a beat and the music deliberately withholds it for a fraction of a second to hit the offbeat, it creates a micro moment of tension, followed by a rewarding release.
Oh, I love that. Tension and release. And this triggers a subtle dopamine response in the basal ganglia, which is the part of the brain involved in motor control and reward.
So what did the researchers find when they combined this syncopated music with the light stepping exercise?
Using functional near-infrared spectroscopy, they observed a significant, measurable surge in blood flow and neural activity in the prefrontal cortex.
The prefrontal cortex. We mentioned it earlier as the part of the brain handling reading comprehension, but it does much more than that, doesn't it? I've heard it described as the CEO of the brain.
It is a very fitting metaphor. The prefrontal cortex sits right behind your forehead, and it is the last part of the human brain to fully evolve. It oversees all executive functions.
That's right.
If the brain is a massive corporation, the prefrontal cortex is the chief executive making all the high-level decisions. It controls your ability to plan for the future, to inhibit impulsive behaviors, to hold complex arguments in your mind, and to exercise nuanced judgment.
And doing a light, bouncy two-step to James Brown, or a funky bass line, physically upgrades the CEO's processing power.
It significantly enhances executive cognitive performance immediately following the activity. The subjects performed better on complex cognitive tasks than those who exercised in silence or to non-groove music.
That is mad.
The physical movement, combined with the rhythmic complexity of the syncopation, provides a unique, highly stimulating workout for the neural networks in the frontal lobe.
But, there is a massive catch to this study, isn't there? It is not a universal biological law.
The caveat is absolutely vital here. The cognitive enhancement was not uniform across all subjects.
Why not?
The surge in prefrontal cortex activity only occurred in individuals who reported a strong, positive emotional response to the music. They had to genuinely feel the groove and enjoy the sensation.
So if I absolutely despise funk music, forcing myself to step along to a syncopated bass line isn't going to make me smarter. It is just going to annoy me.
Because if you hate the music, we are back to cognitive friction.
Oh, of course.
The annoyance triggers a stress response, which diverts resources away from the prefrontal cortex and towards the amygdala to deal with the unpleasant stimulus.
Yeah.
The joy, the subjective pleasure of the groove, is the necessary chemical catalyst to unlock the cognitive benefits.
So the physical catalyst prescription is highly tailored. 170 BPM to numb the pain of a long run, 120 plus to spike power for a heavy lift, and a daily dose of light movement to whatever syncopated music brings you absolute joy to keep the CEO of your brain sharp.
Exactly. It has to be music you love.
Right. Now, I want to go even deeper.
Deeper than the brain's CEO.
Deeper, we have moved from emotions to cognitive focus to physical muscles and brain regions. I want to go right down to the cellular level.
Let's do it.
Because the stack of medical trials we have makes a claim that borders on the unbelievable.
It really does.
It claims that acoustic sound waves can act as a preventative medicine against physical viruses. How can a vibration in the air act as a biological shield?
To understand this, we have to look closely at the endocrine system and the cascading effects of stress. Let's unpack the study from Toyama University.
Right.
They utilized a psychological protocol known as the Trier Social Stress Test, or TSST.
I read the methodology for the TSST in the prep notes. It sounds like an instrument of torture designed for corporate nightmares.
It is incredibly effective at doing exactly what it was designed to do: reliably and rapidly induce acute psychological stress in a laboratory setting.
How does it work?
The subjects are brought into a room and unexpectedly told they must deliver an impromptu speech defending their personal character to a panel of judges.
Awful.
It gets worse. The judges are trained to maintain completely blank, unsmiling, disapproving expressions.
Oh, that's brutal.
Following the speech, the subjects are forced to perform complex mental arithmetic out loud. If they make a single mistake, the stern judges force them to start over from the beginning.
Just visualizing that scenario makes my chest tight. It is pure social evaluation threat.
It triggers a visceral reaction. And the researchers tracked this reaction by measuring the subject's salivary cortisol levels.
And cortisol is, just to be clear.
Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone. It's managed by the HPA axis, which is the communication line between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands.
Right.
When you perceive a threat, like a panel of disapproving judges, the brain sends an emergency signal to the adrenal glands sitting on top of your kidneys, instructing them to flood the bloodstream with cortisol.
And cortisol's job is to prepare the body to either fight the threat or run away from it.
Yes, it rapidly dumps glucose into the bloodstream to provide instant energy for the muscles. But crucially, because it assumes you are in a literal life or death survival situation, cortisol actively suppresses non-essential biological functions to conserve energy.
What counts as non-essential?
It shuts down digestion, reproductive functions, and most importantly for our discussion, it drastically suppresses the immune system.
Which makes perfect sense from an evolutionary standpoint. I mean, if a tiger is chasing you, your body doesn't care about fighting off a mild cold, does it? It only cares about fueling your leg muscles to escape.
Exactly.
But if we are chronically stressed about emails or, traffic, our immune system is just constantly suppressed.
Which leaves us highly vulnerable to infection. So the Toyama University researchers took these heavily stressed subjects, their blood absolutely saturated with cortisol, and placed them in a room with calming music for 25 minutes.
And what were the results?
They recorded a significant rapid drop in salivary cortisol levels compared to the control group who just sat in silence.
Wow.
The acoustic input of the music essentially intercepted the stress signal in the brain, sending a message of safety to the HPA axis, acting as a chemical brake pedal to halt the production of cortisol.
That is powerful in itself, literally using sound to shut off a toxic stress response.
It is.
But the joint research from USC and Saitama Medical University goes significantly further, doesn't it? They aren't just looking at reducing the bad stuff. They found that music actively builds up the good stuff, the actual immune cells.
Yes, this is a landmark study spearheaded by Professor Haruhisa Wago. They didn't rely on subjective definitions of calming music. They actually used artificial intelligence to analyze thousands of tracks to isolate specific acoustic properties.
So they engineered the perfect track.
Basically, they curated a playlist that consistently featured 3 highly specific elements.
Which are?
Number 1, a prominence of high frequencies, specifically above 4,000 hertz. Number 2, bright, simple, repeating melodies. And number 3, pleasant consonant chords.
I want to interrogate that first element. Frequencies above 4,000 hertz. What does that actually sound like in the real world? We aren't talking about ultrasonic dog whistles, are we?
No, it is well within human hearing. 4,000 hertz and above encompasses the upper registers of a piano, the bright, shimmering overtone of a bowed violin string, the crisp breathiness of a flute, or the sharp strike of a glockenspiel.
Right.
It is that airy, sparkling quality that gives music its brilliance.
But why on earth would the human immune system care about the sparkling overtone of a violin?
It comes down to how these specific frequencies interact with the vagus nerve and the autonomic nervous system. We mentioned earlier that the autonomic nervous system operates in 2 primary gears.
The sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Exactly. The sympathetic nervous system is your accelerator, the fight-or-flight mode. The parasympathetic nervous system is the brake pedal, the rest and digest mode.
And the high frequencies trigger the brake pedal.
Profoundly so.
Yeah.
The evolutionary theory is that high, bright rhythmic sounds, similar to the rustling of leaves or the chirping of birds, historically signaled a safe, predator-free environment.
Ah, so it tells the brain we are safe in the forest.
Right, allowing the nervous system to stand down. And the researchers measure this biological stand down in 2 very clever ways. First, they monitored the surface temperature of the back of the subject's hands.
Which seems like a very strange metric for measuring immunity. Why the hands?
Well, when the sympathetic fight-or-flight system is engaged, the body undergoes vasoconstriction.
Meaning?
It narrows the blood vessels in the extremities, pulling warm blood away from your hands and feet and driving it into the deep core organs and major muscle groups to prepare for trauma or fleeing. Your hands literally become colder.
Like when you get cold feet before a big speech.
Exactly. But when the high-frequency music activated the parasympathetic rest state, the subject's blood vessels underwent vasodilation. They relaxed and opened up.
So the blood flowed back?
Yes, the warm blood flowed freely back to the extremities, and the researchers documented a significant rise in the temperature of the hands. It was undeniable physical proof of the vascular system relaxing in response to sound.
That is brilliant. You can literally measure the relaxation of the veins with a thermometer. But how does relaxed blood flow translate to fighting off a virus? You mentioned they measured a specific antibody in the saliva.
Yes, they tracked the levels of salivary secretory IgA.
Let's break that down. Salivary secretory IgA.
To understand the significance of this, we need to quickly map the immune system's architecture. We have two main branches. The acquired immune system is the branch most people are familiar with. This involves your T cells and B cells.
Right.
They act like highly trained special forces assassins. They learn to identify a very specific known invader, say a strain of influenza you encountered last year or a virus you were vaccinated against, and they hunt it down.
But they are entirely useless against a brand new novel virus they have never seen before, aren't they?
Exactly. And that is where the second branch, the innate or natural immune system, comes in. This is your body's frontline border patrol, and secretory IgA is one of the primary weapons in this arsenal.
What does IgA actually do?
IgA is an antibody primarily found in the mucous membranes. So the mucosal lining of your eyes, your mouth, your respiratory tract, and your gut. It acts like a microscopic bouncer at the door of a nightclub.
I love that analogy.
It doesn't care what the specific virus or bacteria is. Its job is to coat the pathogen, neutralize it, and physically prevent it from crossing the mucosal barrier into the bloodstream.
So it is the Great Wall of Defense. And the high-frequency music did what to the bouncer?
It multiplied the workforce.
Really?
Yes, the researchers found that listening to this specific high-frequency melodic music caused a dramatic, statistically significant increase in the density of IgA antibodies in the subject's saliva.
That is astonishing.
The acoustic frequencies physically stimulated the immune system to mass-produce these frontline defenders, fortifying the biological barricades. Furthermore, the subjects reported a sharp decrease in physical ailments like chronic eye fatigue and stiff shoulders.
Which confirms the systemic anti-inflammatory effect of the parasympathetic shift. I find this absolutely staggering. We can say with empirical certainty that curating a playlist featuring bright, high-frequency classical, jazz, or ambient music acts as a non-invasive preventative medical treatment.
It does.
It dilates your blood vessels, it drops your toxic cortisol levels, and it physically arms the mucous membranes against viral intrusion. It entirely redefines the concept of background music.
Completely changes the game.
But Herm, if this is true for healthy subjects in a lab, it begs the question of how this scales. If sound is this potent a medical intervention, how are we applying these precise acoustic principles to vulnerable populations, particularly those suffering from severe neurological decline?
The clinical application of this science is arguably where it holds the absolute most value. We are seeing it heavily utilized in dementia care.
Dementia.
Yes. Dementia is a devastating, progressive deterioration of the brain's architecture. The areas responsible for logic, short-term memory, and spatial awareness breakdown.
Which leaves the patient confused and, I imagine, often terrified because they cannot rationally interpret their environment.
Exactly. This profound confusion manifests in a cluster of severe symptoms known clinically as BPSD, behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia.
What does that include?
This umbrella term covers extreme agitation, deep depression, wandering, unprovoked aggression, and a severe loss of appetite.
And I imagine trying to medicate those symptoms in a frail, elderly body is just a minefield of side effects.
It is highly problematic. Pharmacological interventions often result in severe lethargy or drastically increase the risk of falls. Therefore, non-pharmacological interventions are the gold standard, and music therapy is at the very forefront.
Why is music so effective for dementia?
Well, while the hippocampus, which handles memory, may be ravaged by dementia, the auditory cortex and the deep emotional centers often remain remarkably intact.
Wow.
A trained music therapist can use familiar melodies to bypass the damaged logical pathways, tapping directly into the emotional core, triggering the reminiscence bump we discussed earlier, lowering cortisol, and bringing immediate comfort.
But delivering this therapy requires a highly trained professional physically in the room. What happens when the patient is isolated in a rural care home or, we are in the middle of a global pandemic where visitors are banned?
That was a massive issue.
Right. We all know that trying to use standard video conferencing software for music is an absolute nightmare. I tried to sing Happy Birthday to my niece on a video call last week, and it was a rhythmic catastrophe.
It gets unbearable.
The slight delay means everyone is out of sync, and it sounds chaotic. How on earth can a therapist conduct delicate, synchronous music therapy over the internet?
The latency issue, that half-second delay inherent in standard video calls, was viewed as an insurmountable barrier for years.
Surprised.
In conversation, our brains naturally adjust for the lag. But in music, precise timing is the entire foundation. If an elderly patient sings a note and the therapist hears it half a second later, then plays a supportive chord on the piano, which takes another half second to reach the patient.
The therapeutic synchrony is completely destroyed.
Yes, the music becomes stressful noise.
So how did the medical community solve the physics of internet latency?
They relied on a remarkable technological bridge engineered by Professor Naoko Kasugi and her research team in a project they appropriately named Music Telepy, blending telecommunications and therapy.
Brilliant name.
They realized that a single software solution just wouldn't work. So they separated the sensory inputs.
Separated them how?
For the visual element, seeing the patient's facial expressions and body language, they used standard high-definition video conferencing, accepting that there would be a visual delay.
Right, the visuals lag.
But for the auditory channel, they bypassed standard protocols entirely and integrated a technology developed by Yamaha called Synchroom.
Synchroom. How does that differ from the audio on a standard video call?
Synchroom was originally designed for professional musicians who wanted to jam together live over the internet. It utilizes highly specialized data routing and aggressive audio compression algorithms to strip away any unnecessary data.
To make it faster.
Exactly, creating a near-zero latency acoustic environment.
How low is near zero?
We are talking about audio delays of less than 30 milliseconds. To the human ear and brain, 30 milliseconds is imperceptible. It sounds instantaneous.
Let me get this straight. The therapist is looking at a video feed that is slightly delayed, but the audio feed pumping into their headphones is essentially live. That must be incredibly disorienting for the therapist.
It requires immense skill. The therapist has to use a professional webcasting mixer and train their brain to essentially ignore the visual mismatch.
They have to trust their ears completely.
They have to rely entirely on the zero latency audio feed. But when they do, the result is pure magic. The therapist can play their acoustic guitar or piano in perfect, empathetic, microsecond synchronization with the elderly patient singing or rhythmic clapping, regardless of whether the patient is 10 miles or 1,000 miles away.
That is a phenomenal piece of problem solving. Bridging physical isolation with perfect acoustic timing. And what was the clinical outcome for the dementia patients receiving this music telepy?
The clinical trials confirmed that the remote intervention was just as profoundly effective as having the therapist physically in the room.
Incredible.
The synchronized music rapidly activated the parasympathetic nervous system, drastically reducing the severe anxiety and agitation associated with BPSD.
Did it help with the other symptoms?
Most notably, the care staff recorded a significant improvement in the patient's appetite and willingness to eat following the sessions, which is a major tangible indicator of reduced systemic stress and improved life quality.
It is a beautiful testament to the fact that the healing mechanism of synchronized sound can entirely transcend physical distance.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to pivot from specialized clinical therapy to the universal daily therapy that every single one of us relies on: sleep.
The big one.
If we can use sound to wake up the prefrontal cortex or build antibodies, surely we can use it to force the brain into unconsciousness.
Sleep is the ultimate biological reset, and sound is arguably the most effective non-chemical tool we have to induce it. Our sources highlight a fascinating, highly rigorous project undertaken by Richard Wiseman and a psychologist named Dave Elliott.
What were they looking for?
They weren't satisfied with generic, relaxing music. They wanted to engineer, from the ground up, the most scientifically potent sleep track possible.
They essentially built an acoustic tranquilizer.
Exactly that.
What is the anatomy of this perfect sleep track? Because I assume it isn't just whale noises and pan flutes.
It is far more precise than that. Wiseman and Elliott's formula is built on 4 non-negotiable acoustic pillars.
Okay, let's hear them.
Pillar number 1. The tempo must be locked exactly at 90 beats per minute.
Wait, I have to challenge that straight away.
I thought you might.
Earlier, you explicitly stated that the optimal tempo for calm, focused alpha waves is 60 to 80 BPM to match the resting heart rate. If 60 BPM is calm, why on earth would 90 BPM, which is much faster, be better for falling asleep?
It seems totally contradictory until you look at the trajectory of falling asleep. If you are lying in bed, your mind racing with the events of the day, your heart rate is likely elevated.
True.
If you suddenly introduce a sluggish 60 BPM track, the contrast is too sharp. The brain rejects the slow rhythm because it doesn't match your current physiological state.
It's the homogeneous effect again, but for heart rates.
Precisely. 90 BPM aligns with the higher end of a waking, slightly restless heart rate. The track meets your body where it currently is.
Okay, I see.
As the track progresses, the theory is that the body entrains to this steady 90 BPM, providing a stable platform before the autonomic nervous system begins its natural, gradual step-down process into deeper sleep rhythms. You don't force them down the stairs, you meet them on the landing and walk down with them.
That makes perfect sense. Meet the racing heart, stabilize it, then lower the gears. What is pillar number 2?
The track must be composed in a strict 44-time signature.
The most ubiquitous rhythm in modern music. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, and its ubiquity is exactly why it's necessary. A 44-time signature offers absolutely zero rhythmic surprises. The brain immediately maps the pattern.
It's boring, in a good way.
Very good way. Because the auditory cortex knows exactly when the next beat is going to arrive, it stops actively monitoring the environment. It requires zero cognitive bandwidth to process, allowing the vigilance networks in the brain to power down.
Total acoustic predictability. And the third pillar.
Instrumentation. The formula mandates the use of instruments with a soft attack, specifically gentle piano and sweeping strings.
What does attack mean in audio engineering terms?
The attack is the very beginning of a sound. If you hit a snare drum, the sound reaches its absolute maximum volume in a fraction of a millisecond. That is a heart attack.
Very sudden.
Yes. And a heart attack triggers the amygdala's startled response, spiking adrenaline. Conversely, when a violinist draws a bow across a string, the sound swells gradually. It blooms into existence.
Ah, I see.
This soft attack bypasses the startle reflex entirely, allowing the parasympathetic nervous system to remain dominant.
No sharp edges in the sound.
Exactly. And the final pillar,
Yes, what's the fourth?
a very narrow musical and melodic range. The composition should slowly, almost imperceptibly, undulate from low pitches to slightly higher pitches, but it must stay within a tight cluster of notes.
So no grand sweeping orchestral leaps from a deep rumbling cello to a piercing high violin solo. It stays entirely in a safe, predictable, narrow lane.
Exactly. By combining these four engineered elements, the stabilizing 90 BPM tempo, the utterly predictable 44-time signature, the startle-free soft attack of piano and strings, and the tight, narrow melodic range, Wiseman and Elliott created a soundscape that reliably forces the autonomic nervous system to step down,
Lowering the respiratory rate.
lower the respiratory rate, decreasing blood pressure, and inviting the onset of stage 1 sleep far more effectively than silence alone.
It is brilliant engineering. It truly highlights the central thesis of our discussion today. We are biological machines, and acoustic frequencies are the software code we can use to program our own nervous systems.
It's empowering, really.
It is. So let's synthesize this incredibly dense stack of research for you, the learner. You now possess a highly specific, scientifically validated toolkit to manage your daily biology.
A literal prescription playlist.
Exactly. If you are overwhelmed by grief or stress, do not force toxic positivity. Lean into the homogeneous effect. Find the sad, melancholic track that perfectly maps to your pain.
Let the music be the proxy.
Yes. Let the aesthetic beauty of the chords trigger a dopamine release and allow the physical act of crying to literally flush the cortisol toxins from your body, giving you the neurological reset of a deep sleep.
It's the ultimate detox.
Right. If you need to execute deep analytical work, banish the loud, chaotic playlists that steal your working memory, build an acoustic bubble using tracks tuned to 60 to 80 BPM, mirroring a resting heart rate, shifting your brain into a calm alpha wave state.
And don't forget the white space.
Yes, ensure there is plenty of auditory white space so your threat detection system can finally power down. If you need physical endurance, harness the physics of entrainment. Push your cardio with a 170 to 190 BPM playlist to force your motor cortex and auditory cortex to drown out the muscle fatigue.
Numb the pain with rhythm.
Exactly. But if you want to sharpen the CEO of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, find a highly syncopated, funky groove that brings you genuine joy and engage in light movement to stimulate blood flow to the frontal lobe.
Syncopation is key for the brain.
And finally, for your biological defense system, bathe your nervous system in bright melodies featuring frequencies above 4,000 hertz. This will activate your parasympathetic brake pedal, dilate your blood vessels to warm your extremities, and physically multiply the secretory IgA antibodies standing guard in your mucous membranes.
It's just phenomenal what sound can do.
It really is. The ultimate takeaway here is empowerment. You are not at the mercy of your neurochemistry. You hold a powerful remote control for your stress hormones, your cognitive focus, and your immune cells right in your pocket.
Yeah.
You just have to be deliberate about what you press play on.
It is a profound shift in perspective, moving from music as mere entertainment to music as a primary tool for physiological architecture.
It really is. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to circle back to the very first question I asked you at the start. What is your daily soundtrack?
A very important question.
We have spent this hour proving just how exquisitely hypersensitive our cells, our veins, and our brainwaves are to rhythm, tempo, and pitch. We physically entrain to beats, our blood vessels open to high frequencies, and our immune systems respond to melodies.
We're wired for sound.
We are. So I want to leave you with a thought experiment to mull over. If our biology is this deeply, constantly tethered to our acoustic environment, what is the physiological cost of the modern world?
Ooh, that's a chilling thought.
Could the chaotic, arrhythmic, aggressive ambient noise of our cities, the unpredictable roar of traffic, the jarring spike of sirens, the constant low-frequency hum of industrial machinery actually be causing a chronic, invisible musical toxicity in our cells?
A permanent state of cognitive friction.
Exactly. Are we living in a state of perpetual acoustic stress?
Mm.
And if we are, what does the true biological silence we all desperately crave actually sound like? Have a think about that the next time you take your headphones off. Thanks for diving deep with us.